Close your eyes and imagine the deep northern fjords. The water is still as glass, reflecting mountains that seem to rise forever into the skies. A soft mist drifts over the valleys, carrying with it the scent of pine and salt. Here, in this quiet corner of the Viking world, far away from battles and longships, life unfolds at a slower, gentler rhythm. Tonight, we do not walk with warriors or kings. Instead, we step into the humble life of a Viking farmer, a man who tends his fields, raises his animals, and finds meaning in the simple patterns of nature. As the day begins, so too begins our journey. The dawn over the fjords. The morning begins not with the sound of horns or the clash of steel, but with the gentle chorus of the fjord itself. A raven calls from the thatched roof of the longhouse. The goats stir in their pen, their bells tinkling faintly. And inside the warm wooden home, a Viking farmer slowly opens his eyes. The fire in the hearth has died down to glowing embers, and the cool breath of dawn seeps in through the cracks of the timber walls. He rises quietly, careful not to wake the children, who are bundled beneath furs. His wife stirs slightly, the rustle of wool blankets blending with the hushed rhythm of the room. With a deep breath of the crisp morning air, he steps outside. The fjord greets him. Still waters stretch like a mirror, cradled by mountains whose peaks glow gold with the first touch of the sun. The silence of the land is broken only by the sigh of the wind through pine branches, and the steady sound of waves lapping against the rocks. He walks slowly, his boots brushing through the dew-damp grass. The air smells of earth, sea, and smoke, the sense of life itself in this northern world. He pauses by the small field where his crops grow, barley for bread, flax for weaving, cabbage and onions for the long winter ahead. He bends, brushing his hand across the green shoots, checking the soil, whispering a small prayer to the gods that the season will be kind. This is no warrior's tale, no saga of conquest, but it is a story of quiet survival, of patience, of the heartbeat of the fjords. The work of the morning. The Viking farmer's day truly begins when the first rays of sunlight crest over the high ridges of the fjord and wash the valley in a pale golden glow. Dawn has passed, and with it the quiet stillness of waking. Now comes the rhythm of work, a rhythm that has defined his life since childhood, and will continue to shape it until his final years. In the Viking world, time is not measured by clocks or bells but by the rising of the sun, the call of animals, the changing of seasons. Every task carries its own sacred place within the day, every moment stitched carefully into the fabric of survival. He steps out into the open yard, stretching his arms against the morning chill. His tasks calloused hands, shoulders broad from carrying wood, a steady gait shaped by long hours in the fields. As his breath hangs in the crisp air, he looks toward the animals who depend on him. The goats are first. They bleat softly as he approaches, their white coats already damp with dew. He opens the small wooden gate of their pen, running his hands along their backs, checking their health. The goats provide milk for the household, milk that his wife churns into butter and cheese, staples that sustain them through the harsh northern winters. With practiced motions, he kneels with a wooden pail, drawing milk in steady streams, the rhythmic sound mixing with the morning breeze. The animals shift slightly, but they know this routine, just as he does. It is a dance of trust between man and beast, survival and sustenance. Once the goats are tended, he moves toward the small enclosure where his sheep are kept. The wool from these animals is spun into yarn, woven into warm garments, or traded at markets across the fjord. He checks their feed, ensuring enough hay has been stored, his mind already calculating what is needed for the weeks ahead. Each animal is more than food or fiber, they are part of the lifeblood of the farm, companions in the long battle against hunger and cold. Beyond the pens, chickens scratch at the dirt, their sharp eyes catching insects in the soil. Their clucking fills the air as the farmer scatters handfuls of grain. Soon, eggs will be gathered as a small but precious treasure in this household. He smiles faintly, knowing how eagerly his children will eat them once boiled in the pot. With the animals cared for, his attention shifts to the fields. These small strips of land, cleared painstakingly from the forest edge, are his pride. The earth is dark and fertile, though the growing season here in the north is short. Every harvest must be carefully planned, for a poor yield could mean hunger. Kneeling, he inspects the barley shoots, brushing aside the morning dew, gauging their growth. He knows these stalks will one day be baked into bread, brewed into ale, or stored for the winter. Each green sprout is a promise of survival, and he murmurs a soft thanks to the gods for their strength. The sun now climbs higher, casting sharper light upon the fjord. The farmer shoulders a wooden yoke, hooks buckets to either side, and makes his way down to the stream that flows into the bay. The walk is familiar, the path worn smooth beneath his boots. Along the way, he listens to the forest, the chatter of birds, the rustle of squirrels darting through the branches. Every sound reminds him of the world that surrounds him, vast and alive, indifferent yet sustaining. At the water's edge, he kneels and fills the buckets, watching ripples spread across the clear surface. For a moment, he pauses, gazing into the reflection of the sky. The mountains loom behind him, timeless guardians of this valley, their peaks still capped with lingering snow. He feels small beneath their gaze, yet also anchored, for he belongs to this place as much as the rocks, the trees, and the waters. Returning with the heavy load of water, he finds his eldest son already awake, rubbing sleep from his eyes. The boy is eager to help, though his strength is still untested. Together they carry the buckets back to the longhouse, where the water will be used for cooking, washing, and brewing. The father places a hand on his son's shoulder, wordlessly passing down a lesson that each task, no matter how small, is part of the great chain of survival that binds them. Now, the smell of baking bread drifts from the longhouse hearth. His wife, already busy, kneads dough with strong, sure hands, shaping loaves that will feed them through the day. The farmer enters, setting down the water, exchanging a few quiet words with her. Life in this household is not filled with idle chatter, words are chosen carefully, and silence itself often speaks louder. Breakfast is simple but hearty, bread still warm from the oven, goat's cheese, and dried fish from the previous season's catch. The family gathers, children rubbing their eyes, their laughter filling the wooden hall. The farmer eats slowly, savoring the quiet companionship of his household. He knows the day ahead will demand his full strength, and so these moments of rest are precious. When the meal is done, he steps outside once more. The sun now rests fully above the fjord, and the work of the day calls to him like the steady toll of a bell. With an axe slung over his shoulder, he heads toward the edge of the forest, where timber must be cut. His son follows, eager to learn. The woods are thick with pine and birch, their scent sharp and clean in the morning air. Each tree felled will become fuel for the hearth, beams for the barn, or planks for repair. The swing of the axe is steady, deliberate, the sound echoing through the valley like a heartbeat. He pauses often, not only to rest but to listen. To work in the Viking world is not to fight against nature but to work with it, to know when to cut and when to spare, when to take and when to give. His ancestors passed down this wisdom, and he in turn will pass it to his children. By late morning, the farmer returns to the homestead, shoulders aching but satisfied. Timber lies stacked neatly, water buckets are full, the animals fed. Each task may seem small in isolation, but together they form the mosaic of survival, a rhythm that turns each day into a victory over hunger and cold. As he wipes sweat from his brow and looks out across the fjord, he feels a quiet pride. His is not the life of a raider or a saga hero sung in mead halls. His is the life of the earth, the soil, the steady heartbeat of the land. And though the world beyond the mountains may be filled with battles and voyages, here in this fjord, the true strength of the Viking people is found in the patient, faithful work of the morning. The flow of the fjord, fishing, boats, and the sea. The Viking farmer's work does not end with the soil and the animals. To live in this northern land, hemmed by mountains and carved by waters, is to be bound as tightly to the sea as to the earth. The fjord is not merely a stretch of water that lies before the farmstead, it is a living artery, a giver of food, a road without end, a mirror of the heavens, and at times, a dangerous, unpredictable foe. For the farmer, to tend to his fields without tending to the fjord would be like living with only half of one's heart. As the sun rises higher into the morning sky and the warmth begins to touch the valley floor, he gathers the tools of his seafaring trade. A woven net, carefully repaired during the long nights of winter, lies coiled like a sleeping serpent. Wooden traps, baited with fish scraps and shellfish, are stacked neatly by the shoreline. A simple fishing spear, carved smooth by his own hand, leans against the side of the longhouse, waiting to be carried. Each of these tools represents knowledge, generations of trial and error, wisdom passed from father to son, neighbor to neighbor, until the techniques became as natural as breathing. The farmer calls to his eldest son, who runs eagerly to join him, and together they walk down the narrow, winding path toward the water. The fjord reveals itself slowly, framed between the tall pines and birches, until suddenly it opens wide, stretching out like a vast silver ribbon. The tide is low, exposing slick stones and clusters of mussels clinging to the rocks. The air smells of salt and seaweed, sharp and alive. Gulls will overhead, their cry sharp and insistent, as though reminding man and boy that the sea always demands respect. Their boat awaits at the shoreline, not a grand dragon-headed longship that sails to foreign coasts, but a small, sturdy rowboat, built for the steady rhythm of fishing and ferrying. Its planks are tarred and watertight, its oars worn smooth from years of use. The farmer runs his hand along the hull, checking for cracks, for the sea is never forgiving of carelessness. His son carries the nets, the traps, the simple provisions of the morning. Together, they push the vessel into the water, their boots sinking slightly in the wet sand, until the boat floats free. The fjord embraces them as they climb aboard. The farmer takes the oars, his arms moving with calm strength, the rhythm steady and unhurried. Each stroke pushes them farther from the shore, the water rippling outward in wide, concentric circles. The sound of the oars dipping and pulling becomes a kind of music, blending with the wind and the cries of distant birds. The boy sits at the bow, his eyes wide, taking in the grandeur of the surrounding cliffs, their faces etched with age, their roots gripping stubbornly to stone. They row toward a place known to the farmer, a spot where the fjord narrows slightly and the water runs deep. He knows this place not because of charts or maps, but because of memory, because his father brought him here when he was young, because he has watched the movement of fish and the patterns of birds, because the sea has whispered its secrets to him in subtle and patient ways. Here, the net is cast. The farmer and his son work together, letting the weighted edge sink into the dark water. With practiced skill, the net spreads wide, like a curtain unfurling beneath the surface. The farmer ties the rope to the side of the boat and lets the current do its work, patience the greatest tool of all. Fishing is not a hurried act, it is a dialogue between man and water, a waiting game that rewards not those who demand but those who listen. As they wait, the farmer points out to his son the flight of seabirds. Where the gulls circle low and dive, fish are near. The boy watches, learning to read the language of the fjord, a language without words yet rich with meaning. Time passes quietly, the boat rocking gently with the tide, the sun warming their backs. After a while, the farmer begins to draw on the net. His arms strain with the weight, the rope cutting slightly into his palms, but he pulls steadily, rhythmically, until the first flashes of silver break the surface. Fish writhe and glimmer in the morning light, caught in the mesh. The boy's eyes light up as he helps lift the net into the boat, the air filling with the sharp, salty scent of fresh catch. The farmer smiles faintly, not at the fish themselves, but at the look on his son's face. This is how knowledge passes, not through speeches or lessons, but through the quiet sharing of work. Once the net is emptied and the catch secured, they turn to the traps. Lowered into the depths with bait, these wooden cages are left to tempt crabs and lobsters. The farmer hauls one up, water streaming from its sides, revealing a wriggling prize inside. His son laughs, surprised by the creature's snapping claws, and the farmer chuckles, remembering his own first encounter with the sea's smaller guardians. But fishing is not only about nets and traps. The farmer also carries a simple spear, carved smooth and tipped with iron. When the water is clear and shallow near the rocks, he stands at the stern, his body still, his eyes sharp. A shadow moves beneath the surface, a cod, slow and unaware. With a swift but fluid motion, he thrusts the spear downward, the tip finding its mark. The fish is lifted into the boat, glistening and strong. The boy watches in awe, learning that skill is as much about patience as it is about strength. As the boat drifts farther into the fjord, the farmer looks around. The mountains rise like walls on either side, their reflections shimmering in the water. Farther out, the fjord opens wide, merging with the endless sea beyond. Somewhere out there, ships sail, traders carrying furs and amber, raiders returning with silver and spoils, wanderers seeking unknown lands. But here, in this quiet moment, the sea is not a road of conquest. It is a larder, a friend, a mirror of the farmer's own soul. By midday, the boat is heavy with fish, enough to feed the household for many days. Some will be eaten fresh, grilled over the fire that evening. Others will be salted and dried, stored for the winter months when the fjord freezes and the world grows silent. Each catch is a reminder that survival is not guaranteed, but earned, through effort, patience, and respect. They turn the boat back toward the shore, the boy taking the oars this time. His strokes are clumsy, uneven, but the farmer does not correct him harshly. Instead, he lets the boy learn through trial, offering only a word of guidance here and there. The fjord itself will teach him the rest, as it taught his father, and his father's father before him. As they reach the shore, the farmer steps into the shallows, pulling the boat up onto the sand. Together, father and son unload the catch, their hands working in silent partnership. The fish glisten in the sunlight, a bounty of the fjord, a gift of the sea. The boy carries them proudly to his mother, who will begin the work of cleaning and preparing, her own rhythm of labor woven seamlessly into the day. The farmer stands for a moment at the water's edge, gazing out at the fjord. He feels the salt on his skin, the ache in his muscles, the satisfaction of work well done. The sea has given, and he has taken, but always with respect, always with gratitude. For he knows the fjord is not a possession, not a thing to be conquered, but a living force, one that can just as easily destroy as provide. The sun now tilts slightly westward, the light shifting, the air warming. The morning's work of the land has flowed into the work of the sea, and together they form the whole rhythm of his life. The farmer turns from the water, his son by his side, and walks back toward the longhouse, where another chapter of the day awaits. The midday rest and the hearth. The morning has stretched long and full, its hours carrying the farmer from the dark hush of dawn to the labor of field and barn, and then to the living waters of the fjord. Now, as the sun rises high overhead and the world grows warmer, the rhythm of the day shifts. Noon approaches, not a bell or clock to mark it, but the steady movement of shadows, the way the birds grow still, the way the air seems to soften into quiet. This is the hour of rest, the pause between two halves of labor. The farmer and his son walk the winding path back toward the longhouse, their hands burdened with the morning's bounty. The weight of fish pulls at their shoulders. But it is a good weight, the weight of plenty, a harvest of the sea to balance the harvest of the fields. As they near the homestead, the scent of smoke drifts on the air, wood burning slowly and steady, carrying with it the faint aroma of herbs drying above the hearth. The longhouse comes into view, its wooden walls darkened by age, its roof thatched thick to keep out the long winter cold. A curl of smoke rises from the central hole, blurring upward into the noon sky. Outside, chickens peck at the ground, scattering and clucking as the farmer's wife steps out to greet her husband and son. She smiles faintly at the sight of the fish, her hands wiping on her apron, her eyes bright with both pride and practicality. She will see that the family eats well today, and that nothing is wasted for the days to come. They enter the longhouse together, the shift from the bright sun to the shadowed interior sudden but familiar. The inside smells of wood smoke and straw, of salted meat hung from the rafters, of wool and earth and life itself. The farmer lays down the fish, his wife already preparing a board to clean them. His younger children come forward, curious, eyes wide at the sight of the gleaming catch, hands reaching until gently guided back by their mother's voice. The hearth burns in the very center of the longhouse, as it always does, its flames a constant heart around which all life gathers. It is here that food is cooked, warmth shared, stories told, wounds tended, prayers whispered. The farmer lowers himself onto a wooden bench near the fire, his muscles grateful for the pause, his breath slowing. He feels the ache of the morning in his shoulders, the slight burn in his arms from the oars, but it is a good ache, the kind that reminds him he has given the day his effort, his strength. His wife sets to preparing the meal. She guts the fish with practiced ease, her hands steady, her motions swift. A pot already hangs above the flames, filled with simmering broth flavored with onions and herbs. She slips pieces of fish into the pot, the smell rising almost immediately, rich and savory. Flatbread, baked earlier that morning, is warmed on the stones by the fire. Butter, churned from the milk of their own cows, waits in a small wooden dish. Everything on the table comes from their own labor, from the earth and sea and animals they tend. Nothing here is bought, nothing imported, their lives are woven entirely from the threads they themselves spin. The children gather as the meal is served, each with a wooden bowl, each waiting patiently as the food is ladled out. The farmer bows his head briefly, murmuring a quiet prayer of thanks not just for the food, but for the day itself, for the fjord that gave its bounty, for the soil that nourishes his crops, for the health of his family. Gratitude is not a grand ritual, but a simple act, spoken softly, known deeply. They eat together, the sound of spoons against bowls blending with the crackle of the fire. The broth is warm, filling, the fish tender and rich with flavor. The flatbread is torn and shared, spread with butter, passed from hand to hand. The children chatter between bites, their voices rising and falling like birdsong. The farmer listens quietly, smiling at their laughter, answering their questions when they turn to him how many fish were caught, whether the sea was rough, whether they will trade with the neighbors this week. His voice is calm, steady, each answer a small reassurance that the world, for now, is steady too. After the meal, the family lingers by the fire. The farmer stretches his legs, his eyes half closed, letting the warmth of the hearth sink into his bones. His wife hums softly as she clears the bowls, her voice weaving into the quiet like another thread of the day's fabric. One of the children curls against him, drowsy from food, her small head resting on his arm. He does not move her, content to sit still, to let the moment rest as it is. For a little while, the longhouse is hushed. The only sounds are the low crackle of fire, the rustle of wind outside, the slow, even breaths of those who drift into a midday doze. Rest is not wasted time, it is necessary, as vital as labor. The fields wait, the animals wait, the sea waits, but for now the farmer allows himself this pause, this heart-centered calm. His thoughts wander as he sits there. He remembers his father, who taught him to row and to reap, whose voice still seems to echo when he holds a net or sharpens a scythe. He thinks of his children, of the lives they will lead, whether they will farm as he does or take to the sea, whether they will stay in this valley or wander far. He thinks, too, of the land itself, of how the mountains stand silent and immovable, watching each generation rise and fall. These thoughts do not trouble him. They simply drift, as natural as the smoke rising from the hearth. When the rest has done its work and the noon meal is settled, the farmer rises once more. His muscles feel looser now, the heaviness of morning labor lifted. He takes a deep breath, filling his lungs with the mingled scents of firewood and herbs, and then steps toward the doorway. The sunlight greets him as he emerges, bright and golden, the fjord gleaming in the distance, the fields swaying gently in the breeze. It is time again for labor. The afternoon stretches before him, full of work yet to be done, hay to turn, tools to mend, animals to tend. But he carries with him the stillness of the hearth, the warmth of food and family, the balance that keeps his life steady. The day, like the seasons, is a cycle: labor, rest, labor, rest. The earth demands, the sea provides, the hearth restores. The farmer steps forward into the afternoon, the work of the afternoon, fields, hay, and craft. The sun now leans past its height, the shadows shifting slowly toward the east. The stillness of the midday meal lingers in the body, yet the day itself calls, steady and unyielding. Rest is a brief harbor, but life in this northern land is a constant tide, and as the farmer rises from the hearth, he knows the afternoon awaits him with its own demands. The air outside carries a different weight than it did in the morning. The chill of dawn has long since burned away, replaced by warmth that seeps into the soil, warming the earth beneath the farmer's boots. The fjord glimmers under the mid-afternoon sun, its waters calmer now, the waves gentler, as though they, too, have settled into a rhythm of quiet strength. The sounds of the village stir faintly across the valley, the distant echo of a hammer on wood, the lowing of cattle, the laughter of children darting between longhouses. Life here does not stop. It only shifts from one task to another. The farmer shoulders his tools, a wooden rake and a scythe whose blade he sharpened in the quiet hours of morning. His eldest son, still carrying the pride of his work at sea, follows with bundles of rope and a basket, while the younger children trail behind for a few steps before their mother calls them back. The fields must be tended, and though the boys are eager to help, the smaller ones are better left to gather berries near the longhouse or feed scraps to the chickens. The path to the fields winds upward from the farmstead, past the low stone walls that mark the boundaries of their land. Along the way, the farmer pauses, kneeling to check the growth of barley swaying in the summer breeze. The stalks are tall and strong, their green tips beginning to show the first signs of ripening gold. Each head of grain carries the promise of bread, of ale, of survival through the cold months that always wait just beyond the horizon. He runs his hand gently through the stalks, listening to the soft rustle like waves in a sea of grass. This is not just a crop, it is a lifeline, one he tends with devotion and patience. Farther ahead lies the meadow where hay is cut and dried. The grass there has been growing thick and lush, nourished by the rains of spring and the long light of early summer. This hay will feed the cattle and sheep through the dark months when snow blankets the valley and nothing grows in the fields. Without hay, there is no milk, no meat, no leather for shoes, no wool for warmth. So, though the work is long and heavy, it is done with the knowledge that each stroke of the scythe secures life for the seasons to come. The farmer sets down his rake, stretches his shoulders, and grips the scythe. The blade gleams faintly, catching the sun's light, honed sharp against the stone earlier that morning. He plants his feet firmly in the earth and begins to swing. The motion is smooth, steady, an arc that flows from his shoulders through his arms and into the curve of the blade. With each sweep, the tall grass falls in neat rows, releasing its sweet, green scent into the air. The rhythm takes hold quickly, each stroke followed by another, the sound of the blade slicing through stalks blending with the distant calls of birds overhead. His son follows behind, gathering the cut grass into loose bundles and laying them out evenly to dry. The boy's motions are less practiced, but eager, his young muscles learning the labor that will one day be his own to carry. Sweat beads on his brow, but his eyes shine with the satisfaction of helping, of being part of the great rhythm that governs their lives. The farmer works steadily, pausing only now and then to straighten his back and breathe deeply of the summer air. The scent of the earth is rich here, the soil dark and fertile, the kind that holds both the memory of past harvests and the promise of future ones. His mind drifts as he works, carrying on the flow of labor. He thinks of the winter ahead, of the hay stacked high in the barn, of the animals chewing contentedly while snow falls silently outside. He thinks of his father's hands guiding his own, long ago, in the same meadow, showing him how to swing the scythe without wasting strength, how to listen for the song of the blade against the grass. These thoughts are not distractions but companions, moving with him as naturally as breath. The sun drifts lower as the hours pass, but the work continues. Each row of cut grass adds to the growing sense of accomplishment, a visible measure of time and effort. The boy laughs now and then, chasing a grasshopper that leaps from the fallen stalks, or pointing to a hawk circling high above. The farmer smiles quietly, though he keeps his own pace steady, his body trained by years to move without pause, without hurry, always in balance with the task at hand. When at last a portion of the meadow is finished, the farmer drives the blade into the soil to rest and leans on the wooden handle. He wipes his brow with the back of his hand, feeling the salt of sweat mixed with the dust of grass. His son comes to stand beside him, breathing hard, cheeks flushed from the labor. They exchange no words, but the bond between them is clear, a bond not forged in speeches or declarations, but in the shared weight of toil, in the quiet knowledge that together they keep the family strong. Before moving on, the farmer walks to the edge of the meadow where a small stream trickles between stones. He kneels, cupping his hands to drink the cold, clear water. It tastes of the mountain, of snowmelt and stone, refreshing in its simplicity. His son follows, splashing his face, laughing at the shock of cold against warm skin. For a moment, they rest in the shade of a birch tree, the leaves whispering overhead, before returning to the labor that awaits. When the hay has been cut and spread, the farmer shifts to other tasks. Tools must be mended, the rake's teeth checked for cracks, the scythe's handle smoothed where splinters threaten the grip. He sits for a while on a stone, his knife working carefully against the wood, shaping, repairing, ensuring the tools will serve for many more days. Craft and labor are never far apart, each supports the other. A farmer without strong tools is like a ship without a rudder, lost, adrift, vulnerable. As the afternoon wears on, his wife and younger children arrive from the homestead, bringing baskets of wool to spin and herbs to gather. While the farmer and his son continue in the meadow, his wife settles on a blanket in the shade, her spindle turning in her hands, twisting the sheep's wool into thread. The children scatter to collect wildflowers and herbs, their laughter mingling with the steady hum of work. Life here is not divided sharply into separate worlds of men and women, of adults and children. It is all one tapestry, each thread essential, each hand contributing to the whole. The sun begins its slow descent toward the western peaks, painting the sky in softer tones of gold and amber. The shadows grow longer across the field, and the air cools with the promise of evening. The meadow, once tall with grass, now lies in orderly rows of drying hay, a visible testament to the day's labor. The farmer gathers the tools, resting them on his shoulder, and with his family at his side, begins the walk back toward the longhouse. The fjord catches the fading light as they descend, its surface shimmering like a mirror of the sky. The farmer's body is tired now, his muscles heavy, his hands rough with calluses, but the weariness is not unwelcome. It is the honest fatigue of work well done, of labor that ensures survival and grants a quiet pride. As they near the homestead, smoke rises once more from the longhouse chimney, carrying with it the promise of the evening meal. Chickens cluck at their approach, and the dog barks in greeting, tail wagging as it circles the children. The farmer pauses at the doorway, glancing back at the fields, at the meadow, at the fjord beyond. The land is alive with their effort, shaped by their hands, sustained by their care. Inside, the hearth glows warmly, its flames already welcoming them home. The day is not yet done, evening still waits with its own rhythm of food, fire, and quiet reflection, but for now, the farmer allows himself a moment of stillness, standing in the doorway with the light of the sun behind him, the warmth of the hearth before him, and the rhythm of the world steady in his heart. The afternoon has passed in labor, but labor is not just toil. It is the weaving of life, the binding of family, the shaping of survival. Each stroke of the scythe, each bundle of hay, each spindle of wool, all are part of the same eternal cycle, the same endless story of land and sea and hearth. Laying his tools aside, he carries with him the knowledge that tomorrow the rhythm will begin again, as it always has, as it always will. The coming of evening, gatherings, stories, and the glow of the hearth. The sun drifts lower over the fjord, its brilliance softening into amber and gold. Long shadows stretch across the meadow, the cut hay lying in orderly rows as though the earth itself has been combed smooth by the farmer's hand. The air cools with each passing moment, carrying with it the scents of grass, salt, and wood smoke. Evening is coming, not rushed, not sudden, but with the slow inevitability that marks the turning of every day. The farmer, his wife, and their children make their way back toward the longhouse. Tools rest across shoulders, baskets hang from arms, and the day's labor trails behind them in the form of footprints pressed into the soft soil. The farmer feels the ache of his body, shoulders heavy, back stiff, hands rough from the scythe, but it is a good ache, the kind that deepens sleep and roots him to the knowledge that he has done what the day required. As they walk, the fjord gleams behind them, reflecting the lowering sun. The peaks that frame the valley turn violet in the changing light, their ridges lined with the last fire of the day. A bird wheels overhead, a gull, white against the colored sky before turning back toward the sea. Even the animals of the farm sense the shift, the cattle move slowly toward their pens, the sheep bleat faintly as they gather together, the chickens flap up to their roosts. All life bends toward rest. When the longhouse comes into view, smoke curls steadily from the roof hole, rising against the darkening sky. The scent of wood and herbs drifts on the air, mingling with the faint aroma of stew already simmering in the hearth. The farmer's wife had prepared it before going to the meadow, salted lamb bones simmering with onions, garlic, and carrots from the garden. Now, as they near the doorway, the smell greets them like a promise, the comfort of warmth, the fullness of food, the return to the center of their world. The door opens, and the family steps inside. The shift from the open valley to the enclosed space of the longhouse is immediate, the cool air replaced by the heavy warmth of fire, the brightness of sky dimmed into the soft flicker of flame. Shadows dance across the timbered walls, and the central hearth glows steadily, its smoke rising through the opening above. The farmer lays his tools against the wall and lowers himself onto the bench nearest the fire. His wife moves easily into her rhythm, lifting the pot to stir, sprinkling in dried herbs that she plucked in summer and strung above the hearth to dry. The children bustle around her, setting out bowls carved from wood, fetching spoons, placing a small loaf of coarse bread on the table. Even the youngest joins in, carrying small cups of water drawn fresh from the well, her hands careful, her steps deliberate. The meal is simple, yet in its simplicity lies its richness. The stew simmers until the meat falls easily from the bone, the vegetables soft and fragrant, the broth thickened with barley. Bread is torn and dipped, butter spread thin across its rough surface. Each portion is modest, but together it is enough. They eat slowly, the crackle of the fire filling the pauses between words. As they eat, the farmer begins to speak, his voice low and steady. He tells of the meadow, how the scythe is cut clean, how the hay will dry well in the days to come. He speaks of the fjord, of the fish caught, of the way the oars bit into the morning water. His children listen, their eyes wide, their bowls paused mid-bite. For them, these stories are more than simple recitation, they are the map of their world, each detail a lesson in how to live, how to endure, how to belong. When the bowls are emptied and the pot set aside, the family lingers by the fire. The youngest curls into her mother's lap, already heavy with sleep, while the older children sit cross-legged near the hearth, their faces lit in gold. The farmer leans back, his body loosening into the stillness, and after a pause, one of the children speaks, "Tell us a tale, father." The farmer smiles faintly. Tales are as much a part of evening as food and fire. They are the way memory becomes story, and story becomes legacy. He clears his throat, his eyes reflecting the firelight, and begins. He tells of Odin, who gave his eye for wisdom, who hung for 9 nights on the great tree to gain the runes. He tells of Thor, who guards the world with his hammer, whose steps shake the mountains. He tells of Loki, the trickster, whose cunning brings both laughter and ruin. The children lean close, their imaginations alive with the gods' deeds, the clash of giants, the weaving of fate. But he does not tell only of gods. He tells of his own father, of winters when the snow rose taller than the doors, of nights when the hearth burned low and hunger pressed close. He tells of summers when the fjord was silver with fish, when neighbors came to help raise a barn, when laughter and song filled the longhouse late into the night. These stories are woven into the myths, not lesser but equal, for the lives of men are threads in the same tapestry as the lives of gods. As he speaks, his wife spins wool by the fire, her spindle turning steadily. The thread gathers in neat coils, the sound of its twisting almost musical. She hums softly, her voice weaving into the rhythm of the tale, and the children's eyes grow heavier, their heads drooping toward their arms. Outside, the valley grows darker. The sky deepens to indigo, stars pricking through one by one. The air cools sharply, but within the longhouse, the fire's warmth holds steady, a wall of heat that pushes back the night. The dog shifts near the doorway, ears pricked, then, when the farmer's voice trails into silence, the longhouse holds a peaceful stillness. His children breathe evenly, some already asleep where they sit. His wife gathers the youngest and lays her gently on a blanket near the fire, covering her with a sheepskin. The older ones rise reluctantly, carrying their own skins to the benches where they will sleep, whispering goodnights as they go. The farmer sits a while longer, staring into the fire. His mind drifts to the meadow, the fjord, the fields, to the weight of tomorrow's labors, to the rhythm that never ends. Yet the thoughts do not trouble him. They flow like the river through the valley, steady and eternal. At last, he rises, stretching his tired body, and adds another log to the fire. The flames leap higher for a moment, sparks rising toward the smoke hole before fading into the night. He looks once toward the doorway, where the darkness beyond presses close, then back to the hearth, where the glow of firelight warms the faces of those he loves. Evening has come, and with it the gathering, the story, the glow. Tomorrow will bring its own dawn, its own labor, its own rest, but tonight belongs to stillness. Tonight belongs to fire and family, to memory and myth. The farmer lowers himself once more to the bench, his head tilting back against the wall. His eyes close slowly, the weight of the day pulling him down, and the fire's crackle sings him into sleep. The glow of the hearth remains, steady and soft, as the longhouse breathes into the night, each life bound together by the simple truth of survival, of labor, of love. The fjord rests outside, the mountains keep their watch, and within the wooden walls, the rhythm of one more day completes itself, flowing seamlessly into the silence of night. The deep silence of night, dreams, stars, and the watch of the gods. The last embers of the day glow low in the hearth, their light softened into a gentle pulse that breathes with the room. Shadows stretch long and still across the timbered walls, and the voices of the family have hushed into sleep. The farmer lies on his bench, wrapped in a sheepskin, his breath slow, even, the rise and fall of his chest blending with the rhythm of those sleeping nearby. His wife rests beside him, their children close, the longhouse a quiet vessel carrying them all into the vast ocean of night. Outside, the valley lies wrapped in silence. The fjord, so restless with ripples in daylight, has stilled to glass beneath the stars. The mountains, tall and immovable, wear crowns of starlight, their ridges outlined faintly by the glow of the heavens. The air is sharp and clear, every sound carried farther in the stillness, the faint rustle of wind in the grass, the distant call of an owl from the forest, the occasional shuffle of a cow in its pen. Above it all, the sky unfolds into eternity. Stars scatter across the heavens like spilled silver, endless and whispers, others burn brighter, steady beacons in the void. The long ribbon of the Milky Way drifts overhead, a shining path said to be Bifrost, the bridge between gods and men. To the farmer and his kin, the night sky is not empty, it is alive, filled with stories, with watchful eyes, with powers beyond their grasp. Inside the longhouse, the fire's glow flickers against closed eyelids. Dreams gather where waking thoughts have dissolved, carrying each sleeper into their own realm of vision. The farmer dreams of fields that roll farther than sight, their grass swaying endlessly under a summer sun. He dreams of the fjord, its waters deep and bright, its fish rising willingly into his nets. Yet beneath these images lie others darker currents, where the sea grows stormy and the mountains crumble, where strange voices whisper from the shadows. Dreams are never wholly gentle, for the night belongs to both blessing and omen. The youngest child whimpers softly in her sleep, caught in some fleeting nightmare. Her mother shifts, half waking, and drapes a hand across the small body, soothing with touch even in slumber. The child sighs, her breath steadying, the dream dissolving like mist before the sun. In this way, the family is bound not only by waking labor but by the silent care of night, where presence alone wards off fear. Beyond the wooden walls, the gods keep their watch. Odin, the All-Father, is said to wander the night with his ravens, Hugin and Munin, Thought and Memory, who circle over the earth and return with news of men. Thor, with his hammer, stands guard against the giants that lurk in darkness, his thunderous power sleeping for now but ever near. Freya, goddess of love and fate, threads the dreams of mortals with visions, some sweet, some sharp, guiding hearts toward paths unseen. The farmer does not wake to these presences, but somewhere deep in his rest, he feels them, the vastness above, the powers unseen, the sense that life is small yet cradled by something greater. He breathes more deeply, as though his body, without knowing, aligns with the rhythm of the gods. The longhouse itself seems alive in the silence. The timbers creak faintly as they settle. The smoke hole above lets through a thin thread of starlight, falling across the room like a blessing. The air is warm near the hearth, cool along the walls, but it is steady, sheltered, shimmering path. The tide shifts, pulling waters in and out as though the earth itself were breathing with those inside the longhouse. At intervals, the farmer stirs, not fully waking, but drifting in that half-realm where dream and waking overlap. He feels the warmth of the sheepskin, the steady presence of his wife at his side, the faint glow of the embers. He turns once, sighs, and sinks again into sleep, as natural as the tide returning to the shore. Toward midnight, the longhouse lies in perfect stillness. The children sleep curled like kittens, the mother's breath soft, the father's deep. The fire is reduced to coals, glowing like hidden jewels in the ash. Beyond the door, the valley is silent but for the hum of insects and the occasional rustle of wind. It is in these hours, the quiet middle of night, when even the animals do not stir, that the world feels most mysterious. The stars shine brighter now, the air colder, the silence thicker. It is a time when men believe the spirits of ancestors walk more freely, when the veil between realms thins. Perhaps, if one were awake, one might feel it, the weight of unseen eyes, the hush of the old ones, the sense of being part of something endless. But the farmer and his family sleep, untouched by fear, held by the simple strength of home. Whatever walks beyond, whatever gods or spirits keep their vigil, the longhouse remains whole, its walls firm, its hearth steady. They are cradled in the deep silence, their dreams flowing like rivers through the night. And so the hours pass. The stars will overhead, constellations shifting, the Milky Way bending across the valley. The owl calls again, then falls silent. The dog dreams, its paws twitching as if it runs in sleep. Within, each sleeper drifts through visions, some remembered by morning, others dissolved into nothing. At last, the eastern horizon softens. The first faint line of dawn hints against the dark, not yet breaking but promising its return. The night, vast and eternal, begins its slow retreat, yielding to the light that always comes. The farmer stirs once more, his body sensing what his eyes do not yet see, that the day is near. For now, the silence holds. The gods still watch. The stars still burn. Dreams linger like mist upon the heart. And within the longhouse, one family sleeps beneath the gaze of both earth and sky, bound by labor and love, carried by time, held in the deep silence of night. The dawn of another day. The silence of night lingers in the valley like a final note after a song, soft and fading, until at last the first strokes of light touch the horizon. The stars pale, one by one, as the east softens into a gray-blue glow. The mountains, still cloaked in shadow, reveal their outlines against the sky. The fjord stirs, a shimmer awakening on its surface as the tide shifts with the unseen pull of the moon. Inside the longhouse, the farmer's eyes open slowly. He does not wake with a sudden start, but with the steady rhythm of one long practice in the cycles of life. His body has already sensed the shift, the faint change in air, the easing of darkness. He lies still for a moment, listening, the quiet crackle of the dying embers, the soft breathing of his wife and children, the gentle shuffle of the dog rising near the door. He feels the sheepskin's warmth, the solid wood beneath him, the weight of his own body tired still, yet ready. He rises quietly, careful not to disturb those who still rest. The sheepskin falls from his shoulders, and the cool air of dawn brushes his skin. He pulls on his tunic, his hands practiced in the motion, his body moving without thought. The longhouse is dim, the last glow of coals painting the hearth in dull red. He stirs them gently, coaxing a small flame back into being, for the hearth must never be allowed to die. Its fire is not just warmth, but spirit, the beating heart of home. Stepping outside, he greets the dawn. The world is hushed, but not silent. Birds stir in the trees, their first tentative notes threading the air. The grass is damp with dew, shining silver in the growing light. The fjord glimmers faintly, touched by the rising sun. The farmer breathes deeply, filling his lungs with the crisp air, carrying the freshness within him. For a moment he stands still, watching, feeling himself a part of the turning of the world. The day begins again. Yet this day is not separate from the one before. It is part of the same great circle, the eternal return that binds man to earth, earth to sky, sky to the gods. The farmer knows this, not in words, but in his bones. His father knew it, and his father before him. The plow and the net, the scythe and the axe, they are tools not only of labor, but of continuity. Each cut of hay, each cast of net, each swing of hammer echoes into the future, connecting generations through the unbroken chain of necessity and care. He walks toward the barn, where the animals stir at his approach. The cows shift and low softly, their warm breath rising in the chill air. The goats bleat, stamping their hooves, ready for milking. The farmer works as he did yesterday, as he will tomorrow, feeding, tending, milking. The motions are the same, yet they are never meaningless. They are a ritual of survival, of respect, of belonging to the land. He speaks softly to the animals as he works, his voice calm, steady. They answer in their way, their presence as vital to his life as his own labor is to theirs. The sun climbs higher, spilling gold across the valley. Shadows shorten, warmth spreads. His wife emerges, her hair bound back, her apron tied. She carries a bucket to the well, the rope creaking as she draws water, her strength quiet but sure. The children stir inside the longhouse, the farmer's eyes open slowly. He does not wake with a sudden start, but with the steady rhythm of one long practice in the cycles of life. His body has already sensed the shift, the faint change in air, the easing of darkness. He lies still for a moment, listening, the quiet crackle of the dying embers, the soft breathing of his wife and children, the gentle shuffle of the dog rising near the door. He feels the sheepskin's warmth, the solid wood beneath him, the weight of his own body tired still, yet ready. He rises quietly, careful not to disturb those who still rest. The sheepskin falls from his shoulders, and the cool air of dawn brushes his skin. He pulls on his tunic, his hands practiced in the motion, his body moving without thought. The longhouse is dim, the last glow of coals painting the hearth in dull red. He stirs them gently, coaxing a small flame back into being, for the hearth must never be allowed to die. Its fire is not just warmth, but spirit, the beating heart of home. Stepping outside, he greets the dawn. The world is hushed, but not silent. Birds stir in the trees, their first tentative notes threading the air. The grass is damp with dew, shining silver in the growing light. The fjord glimmers faintly, touched by the rising sun. The farmer breathes deeply, filling his lungs with the crisp air, carrying the freshness within him. For a moment he stands still, watching, feeling himself a part of the turning of the world. The day begins again. Yet this day is not separate from the one before. It is part of the same great circle, the eternal return that binds man to earth, earth to sky, sky to the gods. The farmer knows this, not in words, but in his bones. His father knew it, and his father before him. The plow and the net, the scythe and the axe, they are tools not only of labor, but of continuity. Each cut of hay, each cast of net, each swing of hammer echoes into the future, connecting generations through the unbroken chain of necessity and care. He walks toward the barn, where the animals stir at his approach. The cows shift and low softly, their warm breath rising in the chill air. The goats bleat, stamping their hooves, ready for milking. The farmer works as he did yesterday, as he will tomorrow, feeding, tending, milking. The motions are the same, yet they are never meaningless. They are a ritual of survival, of respect, of belonging to the land. He speaks softly to the animals as he works, his voice calm, steady. They answer in their way, their presence as vital to his life as his own labor is to theirs. The sun climbs higher, spilling gold across the valley. Shadows shorten, warmth spreads. His wife emerges, her hair bound back, her apron tied. She carries a bucket to the well, the rope creaking as she draws water, her strength quiet but sure. The children stir inside, their voices sleepy, their feet padding on wooden. The dawn of another day is not a beginning. It is a continuation, a renewal, a reminder. The light rises, the shadows fall back, and the farmer steps once more into the cycle that will outlast him, steady and eternal. And so, as the sun clears the mountaintops and floods the valley with gold, the farmer bends his back to labor again. His hands meet the soil, his heart meets the sky, and the rhythm of life carries on endless, unbroken, forever returning, forever new. The turning of the seasons. The Viking farmer's life is not measured by clocks, nor by the numbering of days on parchment. It is measured instead by the breathing of the earth itself, the unfurling of leaves, the slow climb of the sun in the sky, the hush of falling snow. To live here, on the edge of sea and mountain, is to live in rhythm with the turning of the seasons, each one both a challenge and a gift, a circle that never ceases. For him, time is not linear. It is a wheel, ever returning, spinning with the certainty of nature's eternal cycle. The farmer rises with spring. It begins quietly, almost imperceptibly, after the long hush of winter. At first, it is only a whisper in the air, a gentler breeze, a drop of meltwater running along the stones, the sound of distant geese returning to northern skies. Snow withdraws reluctantly from the fields, leaving behind earth heavy and dark, soaked with the memory of ice. The fjord, once sealed with a glittering lid of frost, begins to move again, small ripples stretching outward like the first breaths of a waking sleeper. The farmer sees all this and knows, the time of sowing has come. Spring is a season of beginnings, but also of labor. The soil must be turned, seeds pressed into furrows, animals released from barns and stables into pastures not yet fully green. The farmer's oxen strain against the plow, their hooves sinking deep into the softened earth. He grips the handles firmly, guiding the blade that carves lines into the field, each furrow a promise of life to come. The air smells of damp soil and thawing grass, a smell both raw and hopeful. He works with steady patience, knowing that every seed is a gamble, every planting an act of faith, for storms can come, rains can drown, frost can still return. Yet he plants anyway, as his father planted before him, because the rhythm of spring demands it. In the evenings of spring, after work has slowed, he sits by the hearth with his family and listens to the bubbling of broth and the crackling of fire. The children ask about the fields when the shoots will rise, when the lambs will be born. He answers in a calm voice, telling them that growth takes time, that patience is its own kind of strength. Sometimes he tells them stories of the gods who themselves wrestled with the balance of the seasons of Freyr, who brings fertility to the land, of Skadi, the goddess of winter, whose touch lingers until she finally yields to spring. These tales blend with the reality of his own toil, for myth and life are never truly separate in his world. Then comes summer, when the valley bursts into fullness. Grass climbs high, the meadows turning into seas of green where sheep and cattle graze contentedly. The fjord glitters in the endless daylight, the sun refusing to set, casting its pale gold glow across the water even at midnight. For the farmer, summer is both abundance and exhaustion. Hay must be cut and dried beneath the sun, then stacked high in barns to prepare for the cold that will inevitably return. Fences must be mended, boats tarred, roofs patched, tools sharpened. There is no rest in summer, the earth demands too much, and every hour must be used. Yet there is joy here, too. On certain evenings, when the labor is finally done, the family gathers outside the longhouse, eating their meal under the open sky. The children run barefoot through the grass, their laughter carrying across the fields. The farmer leans back on the hillside, the weight of the day still heavy in his muscles, but the sight of the fjord shimmering in the evening light soothes his spirit. He feels the fullness of the land in summer, the brief but radiant season when the world seems to give more than it takes. By autumn, the air sharpens, and the fields grow heavy with ripeness. Barley sways, thick and golden, ready for cutting. The farmer and his kin move through the fields with sickles, the sound of metal slicing stalks blending with the rustle of wind. Grain is gathered, threshed, stored, for bread in the winter months, for ale that will warm the long nights. Root vegetables are pulled from the earth, their skins stained with soil, their bodies strong with the weight of summer sun. Fruits, if they are lucky enough to grow in this northern land, are gathered quickly, preserved before the chill sets in. The family works together without pause, because autumn is short, and the margin for survival is thin. At night, as the stores begin to fill, the farmer feels a cautious satisfaction. He sees the barn lined with hay, the cellar stocked with grain, the barrels of fish salted and stacked. These are more than provisions, they are life itself, the promise that his children will not go hungry when the fjord freezes and snow buries the valley. Yet even with full stores, there is always uncertainty, for winter can be cruel, and no man can foresee every storm. Winter comes like a closing hand, heavy and relentless. The fjord grows still once more, its waters sheathed in ice, its surface hard and unyielding beneath the pale light of the winter sun. Snow drapes itself over the fields, soft and silent, but also merciless, burying the farmer's labors beneath a white shroud. The longhouse. Harvest, his wisdom carried like seed from an older season. In this way, the household itself is the smallest unit of the clan, a living knot in the braid of kinship. But no household stands apart. Beyond the walls of his longhouse, across the narrow paths that thread the valley, other families dwell, some kin by blood, others bound by oath, marriage, or shared labor. These are his neighbors, his allies, sometimes even his rivals. Together they make up the clan, and it is within this circle that every man's fate is decided. On certain days, when the weather is fair and work allows, the men and women of the valley gather. Perhaps it is to raise the frame of a barn for a newlywed couple, perhaps it is to slaughter a cow whose meat will be shared among many, perhaps it is simply to meet at the edge of the fjord, where boats are hauled up on the shingle, nets spread out and mended while voices rise in talk. The farmer joins these gatherings with a steady presence, his calloused hands offering strength when another's falters. In return, he knows that when his roof needs patching, when his hay needs stacking before a sudden storm, others will come to him. The ties of the clan are practical, yes, but they are also deeply emotional. To belong is to know you are not alone against the long winter or the uncertainties of fate. Around the hearth in the evening, when his children drown and the fire burns low, the farmer sometimes tells them of his ancestors, of his grandfather, who sailed with a chieftain into distant lands, of his grandmother, whose courage held the family together during a famine year. These stories are not told merely for memory's sake, but as reminders: you are part of something larger, your blood is old, your ties strong. Marriage, too, weaves the threads tighter. When his eldest daughter comes of age, she will not simply marry for herself. Her union will bind one household to another, strengthening the clan, ensuring that land, cattle, and honor are shared rather than divided. Already, whispers move through the valley about possible matches, though the farmer does not rush these things. He knows that kinship is delicate, a bond poorly made can sour into feud, while one made wisely can secure peace for generations. Feuds are the shadow that follows the light of kinship. Just as bonds can hold a community strong, so too can broken bonds tear it apart. The farmer has seen it before: a quarrel over land that grows into a lasting bitterness, a debt unpaid that festers into hatred, a killing answered by another killing until blood stains the valley. It is for this reason that clans meet at the Thing, the assembly where disputes are heard and judgments rendered. The farmer himself has stood there, among his kin, listening as voices rise, as men argue fiercely, as the law speaker recites the ancient codes. He knows that peace is fragile, that honor is fierce, and that sometimes only careful words or shared labor can keep neighbors from becoming enemies. Yet most days, life flows not in quarrels but in cooperation. When a new boat is built, the clan gathers to drag it down to the water, voices straining in unison, laughter echoing as it slides into the fjord. When a feast is held, perhaps for a marriage or a birth, everyone brings what they can. One family brings butter, another a haunch of venison, another barrels of ale. Fires are lit, songs are sung, children chase each other beneath the watchful eyes of their elders. The farmer feels the warmth of kinship most strongly in these moments, when the burdens of survival ease for a little while, replaced by joy and togetherness. The bonds of kin and clan extend beyond the valley, too. Sometimes distant relatives arrive, traveling across mountains or fjords to visit, bringing news of other settlements. Sometimes a messenger comes from a neighboring chieftain, calling for aid in war or for help in trade. The farmer knows that his life, though rooted in soil and sea, is part of a web that stretches far across Norway, across the northern seas, even into lands he has never seen. He may be a farmer, but his kinship ties link him to warriors, to traders, to men who travel as far as the lands of the Saxons or the Rus. And always, beneath all this, there is a deeper sense of belonging, not only to family, not only to clan, but to the very ancestors who walk behind him. Their bones rest in mounds near the fields, their memory kept alive in stories, in names, in the quiet ritual spoken at the hearth. When the farmer pours a small splash of ale into the earth before drinking, it is not wasted, it is given to those who came before, an offering to kin who are unseen but never absent. The farmer's children grow up in this web of kinship, learning not only to farm, fish, and herd, but also to honor their blood and their bonds. They watch how their father greets his neighbors, how he speaks at the assembly, how he helps others in times of need. They see that strength is not measured only by how much land you till or how many fish you catch, but also by how you stand beside your kin when hardship comes. And hardship always comes. A storm might flatten the fields. A disease might strike the cattle. A raiding band might sweep down the fjord, their sails dark against the horizon. In those moments, the farmer knows that his survival rests not on himself alone, but on the clan, on many hands lifting together, on many hearts bound by oath and blood. As the seasons turn and the years pass, the farmer comes to see that his life is one thread among many. Alone, a thread is fragile; together, woven into kinship, the fabric is strong enough to endure winters, storms, even death. It is in this knowledge that he finds his truest strength, not in the fields, not in the nets, but in the people around him, the clan that carries his life as surely as he carries theirs. The farmer sits by the hearth one night, his children asleep, his wife humming softly as she spins wool. Outside, the stars gleam cold and bright, their light falling over the fjord, over the mountains, over every longhouse in the valley. He thinks of his kin, those near, those far, those long gone but still remembered. He feels their presence, a weight and a comfort both. The cycle of seasons will always return. The earth will always demand, the sea will always provide, winter will always test. But it is kin and clan that give those cycles meaning, that hold a man in place when the storms rage. And so the farmer, in his quiet strength, knows this truth: no man lives alone, no man survives alone. We are all bound, as tightly as wood and iron bind the longship's frame, as tightly as roots bind the tree to the soil. And in this binding, life endures. Faith, ritual, and the gods. The farmer's life is never only earth and sea, never only sweat and toil. Beneath every action, there flows another current unseen, but always present. It is the current of faith, of reverence for the powers that dwell in the world around him, the gods of Asgard, the spirits of field and forest, the ancestors whose memory lingers like the glow of embers. For the Viking farmer, the work of the hands is bound inseparably to the work of the spirit. When he rises before dawn and feels the cold bite of the fjord's air against his skin, he does not only feel the weather. He feels the presence of Thor, the hammer-bearer who drives storms and breaks the frost with his thunder. When he scatters seed into the soil, he thinks of Freyr, who blesses fields with fertility and brings peace when harvests are plentiful. When he sees the sun climb slowly above the mountains, golden and strong, he thinks of Sol, the sun goddess who rides her chariot across the sky, forever fleeing the wolf that hunts her. Every god has a place in his life, every myth a lesson. These stories are not far-off tales meant only for long winter nights, they are woven into the day itself. He whispers them to his children as he works, tells them by the fire, repeats them to himself when labor grows heavy. They are reminders, of courage in hardship, of patience in waiting, of strength when storms come. Rituals, too, are woven into the farmer's days. Before a hunt, he might sprinkle mead upon the ground, asking the gods for a safe return and a steady aim. At the first harvest of summer, he sets aside the choicest sheaves, laying them upon a stone as an offering to the unseen powers. Even when slaughtering a goat or cow for food, he pauses first, murmuring words of thanks, a recognition that life feeds life. The hearth is the sacred center of these rituals. At its flames, he speaks to the ancestors, pouring a small sip of ale or mead into the fire before he drinks. His wife, too, honors the old ways. She ties small bundles of herbs above the doorway to keep away ill fortune, and when a child falls ill, she whispers protective charms taught by her mother before her. These are not grand ceremonies, but the daily threads of faith, quiet gestures, words softly spoken, deeds repeated until they feel as natural as breathing. Yet there are greater rites as well, when the whole clan gathers. In the heart of the valley, on a rise above the fjord, stands a grove of ancient trees. Here, beneath the spreading branches, offerings are made in times of need. A feast animal may be sacrificed, its blood sprinkled upon the stones and its meat shared among all present. Fires blaze high, torches flicker in the dusk, and voices rise together in chant and song. The farmer has stood there many times, shoulder to shoulder with his kin, feeling the weight of the god's presence in the hush between words, in the sparks that leap skyward, in the solemn silence that follows a prayer. Omens, too, shape his days. He reads them in the flight of ravens over the fjord, in the way smoke twists upward from the hearth, in the dreams that linger after night's deep silence. A sudden storm at sea may be taken as Thor's warning, a bountiful catch may be Freyr's blessing. When his wife dreams of wolves circling the longhouse, he listens closely, for dreams are not idle things, they are messages, sent from beyond, deserving of attention. The farmer does not think of the gods as distant beings, far removed in lofty halls. They are near. Odin's wisdom whispers in the wind that moves through the valley, Njord's power is felt in the pull of the tide, Frigg's watchfulness lingers in the safety of his children at play. Even the land itself is alive, the mountain above the fjord, the stream that cuts through the meadow, the stones that ring the fields. Spirits dwell in them, quiet but real, and he treats them with respect. To cut down a tree without thought, to build upon a stone without offering, is to invite misfortune. At times, when the work of the farm grows heavy and his body aches, the farmer lifts his gaze skyward, seeking strength not in his own arms but in the knowledge that he is part of something larger. The gods see him, the ancestors guide him, the world itself holds him. This is faith, but it is also balance, a way of walking through life with reverence, of knowing that every furrow turned, every net cast, every fire lit is part of a greater harmony. Winter brings the deepest rituals. As snow buries the fields and the long nights stretch endlessly, the clan gathers for blot, the midwinter feast of sacrifice. Ale flows, fires roar, songs are sung louder than the howling wind outside. The farmer offers what he can, perhaps a goat, perhaps a carved token of wood, placing it upon the altar so that the gods may look kindly on the year to come. These moments are both solemn and joyful, heavy with tradition yet warm with community. The farmer feels his ancestors close on these nights, as if the very walls of the longhouse hum with their voices, as if the flames themselves carry their blessings. Faith does not protect him from hardship. Storms still come, crops still fail, sickness still strikes. Yet faith gives those hardships meaning. A poor harvest may be a trial sent by the gods, a way to test resilience. A sickness may be a call to strengthen the bonds of kin, to remind all of the fragility of life. Even death itself is not the end but a crossing into the halls of the ancestors, into Valhalla for the brave, into the fields of hell for others. The farmer teaches his children these truths not as dogma, but as stories, as ways of seeing the world. He tells them of Odin's sacrifice upon the world tree, of Thor's battles against the giants, of Freya's tears of gold. He does not demand belief, he offers wisdom, a way to live with reverence, to walk through each day knowing that the seen and unseen flow together. And so faith becomes the unseen thread holding the fabric of his life. It is in the bowing of his head before the first meal of the day. It is in the careful scattering of grain upon the soil. It is in the whispered prayer when storms shake the longhouse, when a child coughs in the night, when the sea rises against the boat. It is quiet, steady, unbroken, as constant as the turning of seasons, as enduring as the stones that stand above the fjord. The farmer knows that one day, his life will end, his breath leaving him as surely as smoke leaves the hearth. But he does not fear it. He will join his ancestors, walk among the gods, become part of the great pattern that has always been. Until then, he lives each day with reverence, for the gods who shape the world, for the spirits who dwell unseen, for the family and clan who walk beside him. For in faith, as in labor, there is meaning. And in that meaning, life endures. Trade, travel, and the wider world. The fjord may seem like a narrow cradle, hemmed in by mountains, its waters calm beneath the morning sun, but to the Viking farmer it is also a pathway, an open road leading outward into the vast unknown. His daily life is bound to the soil beneath his boots and the cattle in his barn, yet the wider world brushes constantly against the edges of his existence. In the goods he handles, in the stories he hears, in the ships that pass his shoreline, he feels the tug of places far beyond the valley. It begins with the boat, for every Viking farmer knows the sea as well as the soil. His own craft may be small, built for fishing or ferrying hay across the fjord, yet he has seen the longships glide past sleek, carved, their sails bellied with wind, their crews chanting as oars strike the water in rhythm. These ships are more than vessels, they are bridges to other worlds. They carry men from farmsteads like his across oceans, across rivers, across the very edge of maps. Trade is the lifeblood of this outward gaze. Even if he never sails farther than the nearest market town, the farmer is part of an economy without borders. The wool from his sheep may be spun and dyed, then traded for salt brought from distant coasts. His surplus fish may be bartered for grain grown in another valley, or for iron tools forged by a smith who himself obtained or from lands far inland. A single bead, a small, gleaming trinket might pass through his wife's hands, carried first from the sands of Arabia, passed by merchants through rivers and markets, until it reached a stall on the edge of his fjord. At the summer market gatherings, the world opens wide before him. Farmers and fishers, hunters and craftsmen all bring their goods, laying them out on blankets or tables. Here, he sees iron nails, sturdy and gleaming, more precious than gold to a man who builds with wood. He sees bright cloth dyed in colors his valley's herbs cannot make, deep blues, radiant reds, rich purples. He sees combs carved from walrus ivory, soapstone pots from distant quarries, amber beads that gleam like trapped sunlight. Every item has a journey, every journey a story. And always there are stories. Men who have traveled beyond the fjord return with eyes that have seen strange lands. One neighbor may speak of Dublin, a bustling settlement where Norse and Celt live side by side. Another may tell of Paris, where raiders once broke the walls and came away with silver beyond counting. Others still whisper of Miklagard, Constantinople, the shining jewel of the south, where golden domes rise above markets spilling over with spices, silks, and jewels. The farmer listens. Perhaps he will never go there himself, yet he knows these places through the words of others. He passes the stories on to his children, letting their imagination stretch across seas. For in these tales, the world grows vast, and yet somehow still connected to the hearth where he sits. Sometimes, travel is not a choice but a duty. A call may go through the valley, a ship is being outfitted, men are needed for the crew. Even a farmer may leave his plow to take up an oar or a spear, joining others to raid or to trade, for in this age the line between the two is thin. He may be gone a summer, perhaps longer, and when he returns he brings with him not only silver or spices but new ways of thinking, new stories, new customs. The farm feels different after such journeys, as though the very walls of the longhouse hum with echoes of far-off lands. The women of the valley, too, are part of this web. A farmer's wife may never step onto a ship's deck, but she handles the goods that come from beyond the fjord. She may barter with a trader for fine glass beads, their colors unlike anything made locally. She may cook with salt carried from England, or stitch cloth woven from flax that came upriver on a foreign boat. She is the keeper of the household, and through her hands passes the proof that their world is connected to countless others. The farmer's children grow up knowing that their fjord is not the whole of existence. They hear sagas of men who sailed to Iceland, who found green shores in Greenland, who whispered of a place even farther west, Vinland, a land of forests and grapes. These tales are half wonder, half truth, but in them lies a message: the world is wide, and it waits. Some children will stay, tending the soil as their father does. Others will take to the sea, their lives carried by sails into the unknown. Travel is not only outward. The world also comes inward. Traders from far-off lands sometimes appear in the valley, their accents strange, their wares stranger still. Perhaps a man from the east brings furs thicker than any found nearby, or a merchant shows off coins stamped with the profile of emperors the farmer has never heard of. These glimpses are fleeting, yet they remind all who see them that the fjord is part of a network far larger than any single clan, larger even than the Viking lands themselves. Yet with trade and travel comes risk. The farmer knows that ships sink, that storms rise suddenly, that raiders prey upon the weak. He knows that greed can fracture bonds, that wealth can bring envy. To welcome the world is to welcome its dangers, too. Still, he accepts this truth as he accepts the sea's moods, unpredictable, but full of possibility. When he stands at the water's edge, watching a longship disappear into the horizon, the farmer feels a quiet awe. He may never walk the markets of Constantinople or see the great rivers of Russia, but in a way, he is already connected to them. The wool on his back, the salt in his food, the tales in his memory, all are threads in the great web that ties fjord to ocean, ocean to continent, continent to continent. And so his world is not small. It is vast, stretching outward with every tide, carried on the backs of ships, whispered in the words of travelers, gleaming in the beads his children string on cord. The soil sustains him, the sea provides, but it is trade and travel that remind him that life is a journey, that even the quietest farmer in the narrowest fjord is part of the wide, unending world. War, honor, and the shield. The fjord lies still in the afternoon sun, its surface gleaming like hammered bronze, but within the farmer's mind there stirs another rhythm heavier, sterner, carried in memory and in duty. For though his life is bound to the plough and the oar, he is also bound to the shield. In this world, the Viking farmer is never only a tiller of soil or fisher of waters. He is a warrior in waiting, his peace always shadowed by the knowledge that he may be called to fight for his kin, his clan, or his honor. The longhouse itself speaks of this double life. By the doorway, leaning against the timbered wall, rests a round shield, its painted boss dulled by years of use. Beside it, an axe not only for wood, but for battle hangs where it can be reached quickly. Every man keeps such weapons, for in the Viking Age, defense was not left to soldiers alone. A farmer was his own guard, his own warrior, ready to step from the field into the fray if the moment demanded. The farmer remembers his father's voice, low and firm, teaching him as a boy how to grip a spear, how to hold a shield so that it covers not just the chest but the legs. The earth feeds us, his father had said, but the shield keeps the earth ours. It was a lesson that all sons learned, land was life, and life was kept by strength. And so, while the rhythm of the day is sown in furrows and cast into nets, another rhythm is trained in the heart. On quiet evenings, when work was done and the sun sank behind the peaks, the men of the valley would gather on the grassy flats by the shore. There they trained with spear and sword, striking wood against wood, shield against shield, learning to stand in a wall of men where no blow could pass. These practices were not games but rehearsals of survival. The farmer himself has stood in such lines, his shoulder pressed to the next man's, shield locked tight, the sound of blows ringing through the timber of defense. His arms remember the strain, his ears the roar, his chest the quickened heartbeat. And though months may pass with no call to arms, the memory is never far. For a Viking farmer knows that peace is only the pause between storms. Honor, too, binds him as tightly as any oath. To turn away from battle when kin or clan are threatened is to invite shame greater than death. The sagas told around the fire remind him. Stories of men who died with their names shining, and of those whose names sank in disgrace. It is not glory alone that drives him, it is belonging. To stand with his kin, shield raised, is to stand within the fabric of the community itself. Sometimes the call is defense against raiders from another fjord, or against feuding neighbors whose quarrels ignite into blood. Sometimes it is a journey to sail outward, far across the sea, to raid or to claim. Though he is no wandering berserker, the farmer cannot help but be drawn into these tides when they rise. A boat waits always at the water's edge, and the farmer knows how quickly it can be filled with men, weapons, and oaths. And yet, he does not think of war with hunger or with bloodlust. He thinks of it as he thinks of storms dangerous, inevitable, demanded by the world itself. Just as the field cannot grow without rain and sun, the community cannot survive without strength. War is the darker harvest, reaped not from soil but from steel, from the courage of men who stand together and refuse to break. The shield, then, is more than wood and iron. It is a circle of belonging, a round world of protection. When he trains, when he hangs it on the wall, when he teaches his son to hold it, the farmer feels that weight. He is part of a chain that stretches backward into ancestors and forward into descendants. Each man bears the shield in his time, then passes it onward, worn but unbroken. At times, as he works the hayfields, the farmer glances toward the mountains, half expecting to see smoke rising, a warning, a summons. He knows it may come tomorrow or not for years. He does not dwell on it, but neither does he forget. For in his life, peace and war are braided together like strands of the same rope, inseparable, pulling in different directions but always one cord. And so he labors by day, yet sleeps with a sword within reach. He plants in spring, yet dreams of shield walls. He teaches his children how to milk the goats, but also how to notch an arrow. His wife, too, understands. She spins wool for clothing, but also for sails, knowing that one day her husband or sons may ride the wind into danger. This is the truth of the Viking Age. The farmer's hand is calloused by the plow, but also hardened by the hilt. The fjord gives peace, but the horizon promises battle. Honor demands both to feed one's kin, and to defend them, to stand ready at the sound of the horn. And when the day ends, and the shield rests once more by the door, the farmer feels no contradiction. For him, life is not divided between war and peace, but joined, two halves of one whole, two edges of the same blade. To live in his time is to accept both, and to carry both, as naturally as breath itself. Sagas and storytelling. When the shield is set aside and the axe rests quiet in its place, the Viking farmer returns to another inheritance, one as enduring as the soil and the sea, the inheritance of history. For in his world, strength was not only tested in the clash of weapons, but in the weaving of words, the sagas that gave meaning to deeds, that turned fleeting lives into lasting memories. The longhouse grows warm in the evening. The hearth glows with steady embers, casting shadows that flicker across the timbered walls. The day's laborers lie behind, and with the animals settled and the fields silent, the farmer and his kin gather in the circle of firelight. Children lean against their parents, half drowsy, their eyes wide with expectation. Elders clear their throats softly, ready to summon the voices of the past. Here, among the crackle of flames and the low hum of the night wind outside, the sagas live. The farmer himself has heard them since he was small, sitting just as his children do now, the fire painting their faces with gold. He remembers the awe he felt when first hearing of Sigurd and the dragon, of gods who walked among men, of heroes who faced impossible odds with courage that seemed carved from stone. These tales are not distant, they live close, shaping how he sees the world. When he lifts his shield, he feels in his heart the echo of those who stood in shield walls before him. When he labors in the field, he recalls the wisdom of gods who taught mankind the ways of sowing and reaping. The stories come in many shapes. Some are great sagas of kings and warriors, of voyages across stormy seas, of vengeance and love, of honor and betrayal. These sagas thunder with grandeur, reminding each listener that their people have a history as deep as the fjords, as wide as the ocean. But there are also smaller tales, stories of foxes and spirits, of omens in the flight of ravens, of strange happenings in the night. These are told with a wink, with a smile, their lessons hidden like sparks among the laughter. The farmer knows that these tales carry more than entertainment. They are a kind of second shield, a protection against forgetting. For what is forgotten may as well never have been, and to be remembered is to live again, to stand eternal. A man may die in battle, a house may fall to fire, a ship may sink into the depths, but if his story is told, he is not truly gone. His name, carried in words, becomes as enduring as the mountains. As the sagas unfold, the longhouse fills with sound. A deep voice recounts the deeds of ancestors who fought in lands far to the west. A higher voice sings a verse of poetry, its rhythm like the beating of oars. Children gasp and laugh, their hands clutching at their mother's sleeve. Even the farmer, who has heard these stories many times before, feels his pulse quicken when the old lines are spoken, when the names of heroes are called. And sometimes, after the old tales are finished, new ones are born. A man might rise and tell of the voyage he himself once made, of storms that nearly swallowed his ship, of treasures glimpsed in foreign markets, of foes faced and overcome. The farmer listens carefully, for he knows that today's memories are tomorrow's sagas. He thinks of his own life of mornings in the fields, of nights on the sea, of days when the shield was lifted. Someday, perhaps, his children's children will sit by a hearth and speak of him, shaping his name into a story. The fire burns lower, and voices soften. Children's eyes close, their dreams already weaving themselves into stories of their own. The farmer feels a quiet peace as he sits there, listening to the final words of the night, words that seem to blend with the crackle of the hearth and the sigh of the wind. The sagas are not finished, they never are. Each telling adds a new thread, and each thread strengthens the whole. And so the Viking farmer rises at last, helping his wife gather bowls, tucking his children into their bedding. Outside, the stars gleam cold and bright, ancient as the stories themselves. He knows that tomorrow will bring new labor, new demands of the field and sea. But tonight, as he closes his eyes, he carries with him the voices of the sagas, a chorus of memory and meaning that will guide him as surely as the stars above the fjord. Trade and travel. The fjord, for all its quiet beauty, was never an isolated world. The same waters that reflected the mountains and carried the farmers' nets also stretched outward, connecting to rivers, to seas, to faraway lands where different tongues were spoken and strange coins clinked. For the Viking farmer, rooted deeply in the soil of his valley, the world beyond was never entirely distant. It came to him in fragments, in the shimmer of a silver coin, in the story told by a passing traveler, in the small luxuries that appeared in his household and whispered of other shores. Trade was the breath that carried the Viking Age outward. Though warriors and raiders carved their names into saga and history, it was merchants, sailors, and farmers who wove the web of connection across the north and beyond. For every ship that returned with plunder, there were many more that came bearing wool, furs, fish, and amber, traded for silks, spices, glass, and silver. The farmer, whose days were shaped by field and fjord, was still part of this greater rhythm. In the spring, when the snow melted from the passes and the waters opened once more, neighbors gathered their goods, dried fish packed tight into barrels, wool spun into yarn, hide stretched and salted, butter churned into stout containers. These were carried down to the waterside, where merchants prepared their ships for departure. The farmer contributed as he could. Some seasons, it was a portion of his catch, in others, it was wool from his sheep, or even the carved handiwork of his kin. When the ships left the fjord, the farmer would watch, standing with his children at the rocky shore. The sail would fill with the wind, the hull creaking as it turned seaward, and soon the vessel would be a dark shape against the horizon. With it went the lifeblood of his household, the goods that would be traded in markets he would never see. And yet, in time, the ships always returned, not always the same, not always without loss, but bearing treasure. The farmer remembers the first time his wife laid hands on a piece of fine glass, its surface shining in the firelight like frozen water. Such things did not come from his valley, nor even from neighboring lands. They came from the south, from Frankish or Saxon markets, where Norse merchants bargained and traded. Once, too, he held a piece of silk, smooth as water against his calloused hands. It had traveled farther still, perhaps from the east, carried along rivers by traders who came from as far as Constantinople. For the farmer, these objects were more than possessions, they were tangible proof of the vastness of the world, proof that his life, simple as it seemed, was part of something much greater. But it was not only goods that traveled. Stories, too, flowed along the same currents. When a ship returned, the longhouse filled with more than the scent of foreign spices or the gleam of silver. It is filled with tales. Of markets thronged with strangers, of kings whose halls blazed with gold, of lands where the sun burned hotter than any Viking had known. The farmer listened closely, as did his children, their imaginations stirred by the vastness beyond their fjord. Sometimes travelers brought darker tales of raids turned bloody, of ships lost to storms, of betrayal in foreign ports. The sea was no gentle ally, and not every voyage returned. When word spread of men lost, the farmer bowed his head in silence, knowing that every treasure carried back came at the price of risk and danger. In his own youth, before fields and family claimed his strength, the farmer had taken part in one such voyage. He remembers the creak of the longship, the salt spray on his face, the way the stars guided them when land was lost to sight. They traveled to markets along the Baltic, where amber and furs fetched fine silver, and where men of many tongues haggled loudly, their voices rising like gulls. He remembers standing in awe at a foreign hall, where stone walls rose higher than any he had seen before, and where the clamor of trade was unending. Those memories live with him still, shaping how he sees the fjord not as a closed circle, but as the beginning of countless roads across the water. Even now, in the heart of his farming years, travel still touches him. Each spring and autumn, markets are held not far from his home, drawing together men and women from valleys near and far. He walks among the stalls, smelling the mingled scents of smoked fish and tanned hides, hearing the low murmur of bargains struck. Here he exchanges what he has for what he needs: iron for his tools, salt to preserve his food, small trinkets for his children. The market is a place of more than trade, it is a gathering of lives, a place where the bonds of kin and clan extend outward to wider circles. And in the evenings, when the market grows quiet, the farmers and merchants gather by the fires, and once again the stories flow. A man from the coast tells of strange ships seen on the horizon, their sails unlike any Viking had seen. Another recalls the markets of the east, where gold gleamed brighter than the sun. These stories mingle with the sagas, becoming part of the great fabric of tale and memory. For the Viking farmer, travel is not constant, but it is always present, a thread that ties him to the horizon. He may spend most of his days with his hands in the soil, but in his heart he knows that the fjord is a gateway, not a boundary. He knows that the treasures on his table, the coins in his pouch, the stories told by his fire all come from journeys that stretch far beyond the reach of his eyes. And in this way, the farmer is part of the Viking world. A world that does not stop at the edge of the field or the fjord, but spills outward into seas, into rivers, into lands beyond counting. A world carried on the strength of ships and the courage of those who sailed them, and remembered in the sagas that echo through the longhouse night after night. The eternal fjord. Night has fallen again across the valley. The fjord lies still, its waters dark as polished stone, reflecting only the pale shimmer of stars. The farmer sleeps within his longhouse, his children curled close, the hearth burning low to keep the chill at bay. Outside, the mountains stand watch, silent and unchanging, as they have for generations. The day has passed, a day of labor, of rest, of harvest and hearth. But it is not gone, it folds into the countless days before it, and into the countless days yet to come. The rhythm of life here is not one of endings, but of eternal return. The dawn will rise again, the fields will green again, the fish will fill the nets again. What is one life, measured against the fjord? The farmer's footsteps will one day fade, his tools pass to other hands, his voice remembered in stories told by the fire. Yet the fjord will remain, carrying echoes of every oar that ever touched it, every net cast, every boat set to sea. The land is remembered in soil tilled by many hands, in stones that mark graves, in sagas that bind past to present. The farmer, resting now, is part of that memory. His strength, his work, his love for kin, all are threads woven into a tapestry that stretches beyond him. His day is not just his own, but part of an eternal story. Of people who rise with the sun, labor beneath its light, gather by the hearth, and rest under the watch of the stars. And so, the fjord sleeps. Its waters lap gently at the shore, as if whispering to the night. The mountains keep their silence. The hearth glows faintly, its embers like the last stars of the earth. In this stillness, the story closes not with an ending, but with a return. For tomorrow, the bell of dawn will sound again in birdsong and breeze, and the farmer will rise once more to meet the eternal rhythm of land, sea, and sky. And you, listening now, may let this rhythm carry you too into quiet, into rest, into the deep and peaceful drift of dreams. The fjord keeps its watch, the stars their vigil, the farmer his timeless labor. And all is calm. All is still. All is home.